They stayed in this meeting for hours, got a consultation or got updates on his signature policy, and then snuck back into the office a couple of hours later. Poor May must have been like, "What are we talking about?" And they were going, "Well, can't tell you. Sorry, boss. It's a secret. Tell you in November." It's just unbelievable that that could have been the case.
Literally unbelievable.
Well,
we are reacting to January's Mayor's Question Time, where the three of us teamed up and were quizzing the Mayor on allegations that we've uncovered that he misled Londoners over the results of the ULEZ consultation. So let's get cracking. So if some boroughs stand up for their residents and stand firm against your plans to expand ULEZ, would TfL use those reserve powers and force ULEZ infrastructure onto borough roads against their will?
Right, I'm interested in this bit because I think that TfL have got themselves into a bit of a doozy. So they're getting the thousands of cameras, but they're meeting this resistance from some of the local boroughs. And I think that what they're going to play is they're going to say, look, well, we're going to put these cameras up, we're going to expand the ULEZ zone out, and if you've got, I don't know, dark spots, as it were, in your borough, and as a result of that, you get rat running and you get traffic condensed there, well, tough. And I think that's the position that TfL are going to put these local boroughs in, and then try and shift the blame. I'm not saying that the Mayor always shifts blame, but I am saying that the Mayor
always shifts blame. When does he not?
Well, that's what's going to happen. He's going to try and shift the blame onto the boroughs and say, well, it's your own fault because you won't let us put up our cameras.
But it was interesting because, as ever, he didn't really engage with the substance of my question.
No.
He just said that he was basically engaging with all boroughs and hoped that they would come to an agreement. But clearly that's not going to happen.
Starting with an email on the 1st of July, which talks about having 30,000 responses. This is an email which, in the subject line, is entitled "ULEZ Consultation Weekly Summary Report."
Okay, so this was so we've got the files here, right? There's lots of paperwork. It's very, very thick. What jumped out at me straight away were these weekly meetings. I mean, they're called the weekly consultation update.
Yeah.
So this is in the calendar for the Mayor and his, well,
not the
Mayor. To be fair, for the Mayor's senior people, they're the ones listed on the emails, to go and get an update on the ULEZ consultation and the results that were coming in. And that's important. And why I wanted to make that clear was that they were monitoring these results coming in. They were actually seeing the number of results that were against it going up and up and up and up. And the key point here is that actions were taken to try and suppress that no vote.
Yeah.
That's why I wanted to establish that these meetings were taking place and that senior members of the Mayor's team.
Well, who was in those? Who was getting the weekly? So it was an email weekly with all the numbers in, and then a meeting to follow up to discuss it.
Yeah.
And who was on that? Who was on that distribution list? There was the Deputy Mayor for Transport.
Deputy Mayor for Transport, Deputy Mayor for the Environment, the Mayor's Chief of Staff, the Mayor's Deputy Chief of Staff, and the Mayor's Director of Communications. And I mean, we'll probably get to that bit in the video. But he was, why would a Director of Communications go to talk to a transport body about a consultation unless you were planning to do something around messaging? I mean,
and to be clear, this is the Mayor's Director of Communications, not the assemblies or TfLs or any. There are lots of people in this building in City Hall who are politically neutral, in theory, whose job is to carry out the role that is assigned to them through a proper process.
Were you aware that there were weekly summary reports going to senior members of your team?
I wasn't, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were.
And that's the point.
And not telling the Mayor anything about what they
Well, he must have been upstairs on his own, bless him. I mean, maybe, it must have been quite lonely. Well, his entire staff went off for this meeting.
Yes. What do they think they were doing?
I don't know. They stayed in this meeting for hours, got a consultation, or got updates on his signature policy, and then snuck back into the office a couple of hours later. Poor May must have been like, "What are we talking about?" And they were going, "Well, can't tell you. Sorry, boss. It's a secret. Tell you in November." It's just unbelievable that that could have been the case.
Literally unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, I'll skip to the end.
At this point, so you weren't aware of these weekly reports, but you wouldn't be surprised if there were. At this point in the consultation process, 66% of Londoners were voting against the expansion of the ULEZ.
Was that when the alarm bell started to ring?
I think for the Mayor's team, yes. Yeah. There's a real sense around a meeting mid-July, right? So the no votes are going up to sort of 69%. We've talked about it being an overwhelming response. I mean, so the no votes, 69%.
I'm presuming that's the headline figure, so that's not even delving into outer London.
No, that's the headline
business
figure.
owners.
So it feels like all of the bigwigs piled into a meeting, and that's where they were talking to external marketing agencies who was, I mean, there's 165, 170 grand that they assigned to a targeted marketing campaign at younger people. Now, I'm only talking about things I've read in the documentation, right? So there's nothing in the documents, to be fair, to say let's get young people because they're going to vote for us. But I think you could draw that conclusion.
Sure, I've been asked about emails I wasn't involved in, I know nothing about, but the key thing is this: on a number of policy areas, it could be policing, it could be housing, it could be transport. I'd expect members of my team to be speaking to relevant organisations on this particular issue. I didn't receive any updates, nor did I ask for any, between the consultation opening or closing. I was the decision maker.
So you would be surprised that your deputy mayor, for example, was receiving updates on the consultation process?
I would be surprised if TfL or Met Police Service or...
I mean, this is what took me by surprise a bit. The mayor's saying, well, I'm not surprised if my team had meetings. I'm not surprised if they were briefed. And I thought, well, hang on a minute.
Should be a bit surprised.
Yes.
We all sat there in November.
Because she sat next to him when he told us that he didn't know. So I got this, there was this noise in the back of my head of a bus going over Seb Dance.
Yeah.
And the mayor running from the scene. And I think that comes out, actually. Throughout this conversation that we have, there's him saying, I didn't know anything, but the team might have been doing things. How would I know? How could I comment on that?
They've all been redesignated as human shields.
Yes.
Yes.
And then he starts to lay down the narrative that he didn't know anything until he was briefed in November.
Specifically the 18th of November, which was after we had important decision-making meeting on the 17th of November.
Absolutely, yeah.
Who is Shirley Rodriguez, please? Could you remind the Assembly?
That isn't a ridiculous question. She's the Deputy Mayor for Environment and Energy.
Right, so she's one of your deputy mayors. When it talks about ongoing engagement in this report, it says that Shirley met with the leaders of 12 NGO organisations, including Rosamond, LCC, Aspirant Lung UK, to mobilise them. Do we know who these NGOs were?
So which NGOs?
The 12 NGOs that Shirley met with?
No.
Okay. What do you think they meant by mobilise them?
I suspect to respond to the consultation.
In a certain way, you would expect as well.
Well, I think it's your inference, not hers, and not what you've read says. But I can understand why you infer that.
So the mayor's not aware of it. Apparently, he both expects his deputy mayor to be involved, but also wasn't surprised when the deputy mayor said he knew nothing about it. One of those meetings was rescheduled because the deputy mayor couldn't make it.
Yeah.
So the idea that they're just observers in a process that's being run by TfL. Yeah. The meeting was rescheduled because the deputy mayor couldn't make it, so they had to put it on a different date because he's so integral to these weekly updates and the decision-making process that flows from it on how the consultation will run.
What I took from this meeting on the July meeting is they're looking at these results going north. And then people have got together from TfL, who are supposed to be civil servants, from the mayor's office, who's not supposed to be acting in it sort of any terms of predetermination or trying to drive it in a certain way. And they're saying, what do we do? So as you'll see highlighted in a minute.
The policy, which he hadn't predetermined and was completely neutral and undecided on.
Exactly.
He was panicking or someone was panicking, someone close to the mayor.
Yeah, and so they start to do things to change the results that are coming in.
Email with the title ULEZ Consultation Weekly Summary Report. And this went to, we've got the list here. We've got Shirley Rodriguez, who's one of your deputy mayors, Seb Dance, who's one of your deputy mayors, David Bellamy, who's your chief of staff, Richard Watts, who's your deputy chief of staff, and as I said, Sarah Brown, who's your director of communications. It talks about the 39,000 responses. What do you think was meant when they said it was having a positive impact?
I'm not sure I wasn't privy to that email.
So this is a guy who's got views on everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's got views on what government's doing. He's got views on what other governments are doing. He's got no view about what his own staff are doing or what they're sort of
how they spend their time.
Significant chunk of their time.
They've paid a lot of money. His staff.
Yeah, there's no way he can comment on that because he's not directly involved, unlike everything else.
Of course you could have worked on timelines. It'd be ridiculous.
So when you came to the Assembly to discuss the MTS, the changes to the MTS on the 17th of November, were you aware that a date had been set that next week for a decision?
No.
That's quite interesting. When he said no and looked at his shoes, because
the body language.
What we know, and I think he was maybe gambling that we didn't know, is that he had that briefing 2 weeks earlier that had that date in it.
Yes.
So he did know.
Yes.
In fact, he had that briefing about 2 weeks before. The meeting was the 29th of September. He had the briefing about 2 weeks before that.
It was probably the second or third time I read through the paperwork that I noticed that there was a timetable for when the decision should be taken, or was going to be taken. And what he said here, if you listen to what he just said, he said, despite the fact that there was that timetable in the back of his Deputy Mayor's briefing, this is the briefing that the Deputy Mayor told us he didn't have, despite the fact that that date was in there, he didn't know that date was in there, and the fact that he actually made that decision on the date that was on the timetable was pure coincidence.
Yes. But the point is, it was also in the document that the Mayor had.
Yes.
So it was essentially the same briefing. It was updated with new numbers as it went all through the summer, but it was essentially the same set of numbers, same set of charts in each of those presentations. And eventually, instead of being to the Deputy Mayor, it was to the Mayor. In September, he received it. September the 29th, they actually had the meeting where they went through it. 2 weeks before then, and that date was in that briefing pack, which presumably was discussed in the meeting, because the note of that meeting says the Mayor was happy with the way forward.
Absolutely. So right back in the summer, they knew the results. They knew that they had to alter the MTS as a result of getting the ULEZ through, and they knew that they were going to take that decision at the end of November. They knew all that before we got anywhere near questioning them on that, and they denied it.
And it says,
but he looks the way he says no and looks at his toes. Quite ridiculous.
Well, all this says so much about the contempt with which he holds the London Assembly. Our job is to hold him to account that in this protracted question session about what he knew and when, he's still not telling the truth.
No.
An email to Seb Dance on the 13th of December under consultation update says, today's presentation provides a summary of the key findings from the consultation and the next steps. A further email dated on the 14th of September shares ULEZ consultation slides for the Mayor. So these are the final results deck for the Mayor. And these were seen by, again, your Deputy Mayor Shirley Rodriguez, your Deputy Mayor Seb Dance, your Chief of Staff David Bellamy, your Deputy Chief of Staff Richard Watts, and your Director of Communications Sarah Brown. This was done in preparation for your briefing, Mr. Mayor, which you had on the 29th of September. Do you recall that 29th of September briefing?
No, but as I said, I understand from checking, there was a working summary of the progress that had been made in the consultation responses.
Should we talk about working summary?
The working summary is this phrase that the Mayor invented today, which apparently the document says on the front of it, consultation results.
Had we ever heard the phrase working summary?
Well,
I don't recall.
I get the feeling that this was probably a difficult meeting they had when the FOI requests started to come in, because he told us, after trying 20 different lines of questioning, he told us he'd had no briefing. And then, of course, when we requested the paperwork and they realised they would have to give up this briefing, they had to think of a way out of that. And they've got this briefing, which is entitled ULEZ Consultation Results, Briefing for the Mayor, on the 20th. It was originally for the 20th of September, then it was rearranged to the 29th of September, right? And they've looked at this and they've gone,
I bet that's not the word they used.
So this document, which is consultation results, let's call it a working summary. and they went, that's a brilliant idea. They'll never see through that.
Yes, no one will know what a working summary is.
So what he's essentially come to us today to say as well, you in October when you asked me about the results, and in November when you asked me about the results, you didn't ask me about the working summary.
Yes.
Semantics. So much of his defence rests on bizarre semantic arguments.
Yeah, because he's been caught.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the truth of the matter. So then he gets this working summary. It's quite funny to say.
There's an accidental typo on the front where it says consultation results.
Consultation results. So he gets his consultation results, and then I think I talk about what's in it.
So you were briefed on the results, you were briefed on actions that were going to happen after the decision, which was timetable, was taken. It was also noted that the changes to the Mayor's transport strategy had to be laid before the London Assembly, which is an assertion we made on the day that it came up. All of these things are in this briefing that you received on the 29th of September. You denied when I asked you about them in October, just a few weeks later. So, Mr. Mayor, my question is, why did you not tell the Assembly the truth?
The questions you asked are quite clear. The questions you asked were in relation to my involvement during the consultation period.
This is the one where the Mayor gives his answer. He pretends that you asked a different question because he pretends that you were only talking about the period of the consultation, and your question actually was, at any time, did anyone give you this information? And he knows perfectly well if he acknowledges that that's what you asked, he is up to his neck.
Well, and of course, what's interesting now we've got the paperwork, now we've forced it out of them, is there are weekly briefings to his senior team, his director of communications, his chief of staff.
Yeah.
So the question I left it there, I tried to leave it there with the Mayor, was why had he not told the London Assembly the truth? And that's important because our job is to represent Londoners. The chair starts every meeting by saying that the London Assembly is the voice of Londoners, which means that the Mayor of London came to the Assembly, sat in front of the representatives of London, and did not tell the truth.
Well, it was an interesting session, and I think there's a lot more to come on this issue. So stay with us. Thank you.